How's it? Welcome back to the channel. It is fantastic to have you here. The opportunities for photographs are everywhere. So what do you do when you are feeling overwhelmed by all these opportunities and that you have no idea what to actually photograph? Today you are going to discover the simple approach that you can use to tease out these photographs. Think of a great photograph as a structure that is built up over a number of layers. And at the heart of that structure, the very thing that is keeping it all together is composition. And this is where we're going to start with helping you find the opportunities for these photographs when you're feeling completely overwhelmed. Too many photographers go off and they think about photographing things. That they're going to go and photograph that very famous tree, or some people on the street, or all these kind of things. And they fall over because there's too much. There's too much going on. And when you start thinking about it in terms of shapes, that photographing shapes and not things, then it makes your life so much easier. So rather than thinking about all the trees and the rocks and the rivers and stuff, that you can think about them as triangles, as pyramids, as circles, as rectangles. And when you break down the objects that are in front of you into their basic shapes, then it makes your job of finding a harmonious and pleasing composition so much easier. And isn't that the best thing? Rather than being going, oh my God, what am I supposed to do here? If you go, well, there's a triangle, there's a rectangle, there's a line, we can start putting these all together. And it gives you far more control over the scene in front of you. Shapes abound around you, and there isn't a single thing that I can think of that can't be distilled down into a single shape. So take a moment to think about the things that are around you in the room and what sort of shapes they are. Because you've discovered so many options for shapes and things like that, you may be tempted to go a bit crazy with it, to include so much in your image because, you just discovered a new approach. But don't, don't do it, right? Take a piece of advice that I heard on another channel that was talking about painting, where they said that, their teacher had said, look, take the painting and shake it around a bit and see what falls off. And that's what you should keep. And the same thing applies to your photography. Think about the image that you've put together, the composition. Is there anything in there that shouldn't be there? Is every single shape and form in that image having a purpose? Does it belong in the image? Think about in street photography. Are there shapes in the place where you are photographing that are distracting, that are not playing the game? If so, then move to a different location and see what you can find there. In your landscape photography, are there distracting elements? Have you tried to include too much? Are there dead spaces within the image that aren't really contributing? Think about your photographs in a far more structured sort of way. In portrait photography, because composition is important in portrait photography as well, we have shapes. We have the square of the torso or the rectangle, depending on your shape, or a triangle. You've got the circle of the head. How can all the elements in your portrait photograph work together? Is there something in there that is elbowing its way in? If so, get rid of it. So now that you have that structure on which you can start decorating your photograph, it's now time to think about the options that you have at your disposal to make that image start to come alive. Are you going to photograph it in color? Are you going to photograph it in black and white? What are the benefits or drawbacks of doing both? Would black and white really make that composition so much more stronger? Or is color a dominant force? These are basic questions that you should start to ask yourself at the beginning when you take your photograph, not when you're sitting down in front of your computer deciding, well, I don't really know, because the choice that you make now about color or black and white will affect the way that you photograph those shapes that you put into a pleasing composition. The same goes for depth of field. Does this call for a very shallow, very narrow depth of field? Are we trying to draw the attention to something and let the other elements support it? Or do we want to show a grand vision where everything is in focus? Indeed, does anything need to be in focus? Do you have to have anything in focus? Or can you just use the shape of those shapes when they're out of focus to convey the meaning that you want to express? Is there some sort of crazy excitement? I'm thinking of Ernst Haas's bullfighting images that, these convey the feeling of the bullfight, irrespective of how you feel about sort of bullfighting, but you get a feel for the mood. Whether or not you are familiar with it, it doesn't really matter. So these are the choices that you need to start making. And when you are layering your photographs up in this fashion, it makes the whole process a lot easier. There are too many photographers who focus, I believe, on the end result rather than the process, that they go, want to create X, Y, and Z image. And if they just spent a little bit more time, just slowed down, be a little bit more in the moment, then their images would have a far greater depth of clarity about them, clarity in a visual sense, a clarity of message, that you would then be able to create photographs that immediately reach out to the viewer and arrest their attention, because they can grasp what that photograph is about and then take time to enjoy it. As a practical way of seeing this in action, look at photographs from photographers whose work you really enjoy. Think about looking at it and can you see the composition? Can you see the shapes that they've employed? Can you see why they have chosen to photograph things in certain ways? Have they chosen to include lots of people, lots of shapes, because that fitted the mood of the image? The more that you do that exercise of really dissecting photographs by people who you enjoy, or any photograph that you find interesting, the more you're going to start recognizing how these photographs are put together. And then when you are confronted with a variety of options, then at least you've got something to fall back on, to say, look, I can recognize bits here. I'm not feeling overwhelmed. I'm not feeling like I need to photograph everything in front of me just because one of the pictures is going to be okay. Just breathe, right? Just sit there and go, oh, okay. Well, this scene reminds me of Van Ho. I'm in a loud, busy place. The light is streaming through things. Okay, well, what did Van Ho do in these scenarios? That's a great illustration. So make a collection of your favorite images, and it's always worthwhile to do this, and think about how they are constructed from the base up. Composition, shapes, and then what is the photographer hanging on top of this superstructure. Right, applying all of this to your own photography is really simple. It may seem like it's a lot, like a lot of these kind of sort of pieces of advice do initially, but the greatest benefit you're going to get by taking this approach, putting it into your photographs, is that you are going to slow down. That rather than feeling like everything is just crazy busy and that you've got nothing, you don't know where to start, right? And then your mind just sort of shuts down and you end up kind of just taking pictures of anything without any sort of thought, is that you are becoming in tune with the thing that you are photographing. Now, if it's a landscape photographers, you're lucky. You get time to relax into things. Street photography, a little bit sort of different depending on your approach, but you are still going to take some time to kind of see where the stories are, what's going on, where's the compositions that your actors, if you want to think about the subjects, photographs like that, can then come into. And that slowing down gives you a chance to get a feel for the ebb and the flow of the crowds around you. In portrait photography, taking your time to think about how the person in front of you is constructed in basic shapes and forms and lines, arms are lines and diagonals and all this kind of stuff, will give you a moment or two to talk to the person, to get them on board with your ideas, and all of these are huge benefits to you. The more that you do these things, the more that you practice this approach, it's going to become more second nature to you, that you're going to immediately start to see a scene. You're going to look at something and you're going to go, aha, I can do this, I can do that, I can do this next thing, right? And that feels fab. It is so good because it's like one day a light is just switched on. You go, prior to this, I couldn't see anything, I don't know, and then boom, it's like it's all cool. And this is what I want you to get, this feeling there, because so many people get so wrapped up in not knowing what to do, falling over things because they're not employing a basic approach every time they go off and photograph. Photography is an art, but it's also a science. And let's use the scientific side of things to help us feel more in control, help us feel more like we are the masters of what's going on, rather than it seems to be like a happy coincidence that we happen to pick up a camera, it happened to have the right exposures, and we happen to point it at a thing that happened to be quite interesting. Let's get rid of that. That's the whole point. I want you to be more focused. So the next time you're out there, think about, the shapes. Think about how you are going to adorn those shapes with elements that convey the mood that you want to convey. The reason that you are doing all of this is not just because obviously you want to have, the ability to see photographs when there's too much to photograph, but also to give your photographs a clarity. The best photographs that we see in the world are the ones that photographers have created that have a clarity and a simplicity of message to them. When you combine this very solid compositional structure that you have built with some wonderful decoration that you've then put on, then you end up with photographs that have a clarity to them. They have a simplicity of message. They're not whiffy, waffy, waffly kind of photos that the person has to look at and go, I'm not quite sure what this is all about. What am I doing here? Think about those great photographs that is stuck in your mind. It's because it is simple for your mind to latch onto it, to imprint itself, print the image in your mind. That's what we want from your photographs. That's what we want to have happen to you every single time you go out and take photographs, is to create at least one or two images that are great, that are like really solid, and that somebody who doesn't know you can look at them and go, that's amazing, I totally get it. And then they spend time with it, and then they pick out the loveliness that you've kind of, put in there. That's what this is all about. There's a video that I put together about Steve McCurry. I'll talk about his compositional elements. Go check it out and see how many of those compositional elements that you now recognize that you can use in your own images. Thank you ever so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon.